All right, it's now 6:30. We can go ahead and I think we have a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started. I will call the meeting to order. Can we go ahead and do a roll call for attendance
Yes. Ken Klingensmith,
here?
Dan Foyle,
Here.
Kelly Rast,
Present.
Fred Wingert.
Here.
Rod Richardson,
Here.
and Ken Sanderson.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
And I do want to welcome Ken. Thank you for being part of the board. Glad to have you back. I know you've been on the board before, so we look forward to having you join us.
Chair, if it's okay, I'll go ahead with the Zoom statement.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. This meeting is now being recorded in the board hearing room with zoning board members attending in person. There is also an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. For Zoom participants wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app at the start of the agenda item on which you desire to comment. Comments will be received from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. When it is your turn to speak, the moderator will recognize you by the name or phone number used to join the Zoom webinar. Please state your name and the city and state where you reside for the record, followed by your comments. All public speakers will be limited to 3 minutes unless the chair designates a different time period. If you have trouble with Zoom, please call 913-715-9666. Board members, staff, and presenters, please state your name every time you begin talking, and please speak into the microphone so that people attending via Zoom can hear you and your comments can be transcribed for the record. This is a public meeting. We are presenting and recording the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a special meeting of the board, and we are going to be reviewing one application that was remanded back. I did want to make sure everyone here knew that the public hearing portion of this application is actually closed. Because it's remanded back, we won't be looking or taking any public comments during this evening's meeting.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Please.
Well, you've just answered my second question, but my first question goes to Mr. Leipziger or planning, whoever can answer it. But I had raised a question regarding technicality, and that is a determination of when our board actually receives a remand from the county commission. Our receipt of that obviously is necessary to start the 30-day clock running. And I think it's important that we clarify what the rule is on that so we know. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Richardson. Jay Leipzig, planning staff, and that was actually why I was sitting up front there, kind of anticipating that question. We have, as you just stated, this item was remanded back from the Board of County Commissioners at their December 14th meeting. In that, the motion to remand, they set a date of February 7th. And we, as we found out, that we could not get a quorum on that particular evening, but by having it a week earlier, we're able to get a quorum of this body. In the future, and this is actually the first time this has happened, where a remand date was set and we're not able to get a quorum. So the language needs to be something to the effect of presented before the next regularly scheduled meeting of the East Zoning Board. If some language to that effect. And then the other answer to your question in terms of the date of the remand, it is when this board meets officially. So the official date of record for the remand for this evening is a receipt of that remand action is this evening. Does that clarify things?
Yes, and I completely agree with your analysis of that. I think that's important to get that down. And it would be at least helpful. I did watch the BOCC YouTube of the entire meeting on this particular matter some time ago, and then watch it again last night to make sure I understood what they were doing. But on their motion to remand this, I heard really in listening to that why they were remanding it, but it would certainly be helpful, I think, to us if we had some sort of formal document from them telling us exactly what they want us to do. I think we can figure this one out, but it would be helpful to me to do that. I don't know how the other board members feel, but it's almost like, okay, you've remanded it, that's fine. Tell us why, what you want us to do, what you want us to consider. So that's my only point, but thank you for answering my question.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, for that, those comments. So noted. I believe Peg Trent, our Chief Legal Counsel, wants to make a clarification on something as well.
Okay, sorry. Peg Trent, Chief Counsel. I just want to clarify something about receipt, just to make sure the record's clear. There's in reviewing that state statute about remand, as you're probably familiar with by now, within that statute, it gives an option of an or, they can give a date certain they want it reviewed by, or the date of receipt, and then 30 days or longer period if, they set a time frame. Usually, if December 14th, it could have come to you at your next regular meeting, which was in January, I believe. And so at the January meeting, you would acknowledge receipt of that particular item. And then depending upon what verbiage the board provided when they sent it back, it would be that 30 days from that date of receipt if you have acknowledged it, because you acknowledge as a board, not when staff send you your packets or information. So now moving forward, a date was given you by February 7th, which happened to be your scheduled meeting in February. So tonight you're acknowledging receipt and then you're proceeding on it because you're available tonight to do it. And it's prior to the February 7th deadline. So that makes it clear. But in the future, it will be more clear to you. And I think when we've had legislation, as you saw with solar regulations, we did a job where we did lay it out so that you knew when you needed to do that. And we needed to carry that over to this now. So moving forward, we'll make sure of that. In addition, the commissioners, I understand your concern about what is it that they exactly want you to review. As you said tonight, it's very specific what they wanted you to look at of those. I think there were 3 items. But in the future, they can give you those particular. We also have access to verbatim transcript potentially that could give you some idea as well, and attaching that video to help you as well.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
And just one additional.
I also had a question. I read, Fred Wingert, I read that there was a petition filed on this particular soccer complex, by the residents. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I probably want to direct that to Jay. I'm not as familiar with your, where we are in that, but I think tonight you're only here for the remand on those issues.
The legal department didn't review the petition?
Yeah, I'm chief counsel. My attorney that was assigned to your board would have reviewed it.
Okay, could I ask a question from them?
Sure, but
Okay.
tonight we are limited to the discussion on the items that were the discussion items as to what the board wanted you to consider on the remand. The petition is passed and that now is moving forward with the actual discussion on those items. But if you want the attorney.
That'd be
present-
great. Thank you.
Yeah, he wants you.
Yes.
Could you explain the petition that was filed on the soccer complex? Does it have any bearing on the vote that we took? Or is the petition just for the vote that's the Board of County Commissioners?
Well, I didn't, I know with what she speaks, so I'm going to be going off of memory. I didn't bring any specific notes regarding that, but we received the petition, we looked at it, and it was found to be not in compliance with Kansas law in order to create the, let's call it the additional requirements in order for it to pass through. And that was related to the Board of County Commissioners.
And that had to do with the percentage of landowners around the property. And there has to be a certain percentage of those to force.
Yes, that was the
Yes,
primary
for
issue.
majority?
That's correct.
Okay. In the calculation, I noticed in the calculation, 2 of the properties that counted, I did review it. I'm sure you reviewed it. 2 of the properties that counted were owned by the actual applicant. And I noticed that Johnson County was also, they own a park adjacent to this property
Well, I'm going to stop you there. What you're asking for is for me to give my legal advice to my client and talk about it right here. That's confidential and it's not, you're not privy to it. We gave the conclusion and that was found to be, to not be a proper petition. If the petitioners have an issue with it, they have remedies under Kansas law to follow as far as that goes. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you what advice and what I gave to my client because that's privileged.
That's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Confidential, but it's public information.
Mr. Chair, that
Thank
concludes
you, Jay.
my comments. Thank you.
Okay, and looking at the agenda, having the one item to consider the lighting, to review the traffic analysis, and then look at hours of operation are the three items that were remanded back to us for review. Do we have any other additions, revisions on the agenda? Motion approved.
Kelly Ross, make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any conflicts of, disclosures of conflicts of interest or external discussions on the matter at hand before the board?
Ken Sanderson. I'm new to the board, but for the record, I have reviewed the November minutes from the meeting, and I've also viewed the YouTube video from the November meeting, hearing all the testimony from the public as well as from staff, and am familiar with the application now.
All right, let's take a look at application number E 23348 PPAU, a preliminary plat for 20305 Metcalf, and application number E 23349 CUP, a conditional use permit for 20305 Metcalf. Can we have an updated staff report, please?
Good evening, Michelle Liner, County Planning staff. I'm just going to give you a Cliff Note version of how we got to this point. There are two applications, a preliminary plat and a conditional use permit for Metcalf Soccer. The zoning board originally heard these items at the November 16th meeting, and then the Board of County Commissioners at their December 14th meeting remanded the items back to the zoning board for reconsideration. And that motion is that first paragraph on your memo. That's what the motion was. Again, go through the highlights and then we can address any questions that you may have. Again, this is a vicinity map. Subject properties on the east side of Metcalf between 199th Street and 207th Street. Excuse me. Here's the existing zoning of the area over the aerial. Property is currently zoned PEC 3, which is an industrial district. The properties to the north are zoned for commercial and residential. To the west, rural. To the south is zoned industrial, and then to the east is also zoned rural with a little bit of residential. The proposed athletic facility is permitted use with a CUP in the PEC district. Just a reminder that this is the preliminary plat application. It is for 4 lots and a tract for stormwater detention. Then the red Xed out area is specifically the area that the CUP covers. This is approximately 48 acres and it includes lot 1 and then the stormwater tract. The CUP site includes a large building with 2 indoor soccer fields, 4 outdoor fields, warm-up area, parking, playground, restroom, utility building, site and field lighting, and additional landscaping screening along the north property line. The outdoor fields are proposed to be used for practice only, and the indoor fields will be used for practices and games only on the weekends. As a result of the proposed improvements, no off-site street improvements are recommended based on the traffic analysis. And here's a summary of the actions that this board took on November 16th. Both the conditional use permit and preliminary plat were recommended for denial due to the proposed lighting location of the project, street infrastructure and the proximity to Stillwell Park. And then again, this is the BOCC direction at their December 14th meeting. It was remanded back to the zoning board for reconsideration due to the applicant's request and to reconsider the following matters: lighting, traffic analysis, and hours of operation. And so tonight, the options of the zoning board are to forward the same recommendation of denial to the preliminary plat and CUP applications as made at November 16th to the Board of County Commissioners, or recommendation of approval of the preliminary plat and or the CUP with stipulations. They are separate applications and they need to be acted on separately, and they can be acted on, you could approve one and not the other. So I can answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Rod.
Rod Richardson, question to you, if you've got a second.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I can't tell from the Phelps architectural drawings, if the applicant proposes to install any screening, any new screening, any screening at all along the, I guess that would be the north property line between the subject property and the residential homes. Is there any screening that's going to be planted there under any sort of a landscape plan, or is it just what's there?
No, it will be, there's an existing hedgerow there. They are proposing to add additional evergreen trees to bolster that existing hedgerow, because there are some spotty places, but then the evergreens will help with that year-round screening.
Do you offhand know what kind of evergreens those are? I didn't see the landscape plan in my packet, but maybe I missed it.
Yep, it's in there. Here's a snippet of it. I don't think it gave a list of options, is what it did. It did not give one specific tree.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted.
For additional clarification, Ron, I think that is under the stipulations number 9. It just indicates that landscaping, plants, and fencing shall be maintained and replaced when dead plants or deteriorated fencing, but it doesn't indicate that there's actually going to be additional or new plants added.
The landscaping plan does show new trees.
Commissioner Klingensmith, is your microphone on?
Yes, sorry, I'll make sure.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Richardson, yes, Sean Penley, planning staff. Actually, I've got the plans. The applicant does show, as Michelle mentioned, the existing tree row plus an additional peripheral buffer with evergreen trees planted 50-foot on center. And those trees, like Michelle said, there's a variety of different types of evergreen trees that vary in height from 5 to 7 feet, I think. But basically the minimum standard, if you're planting new evergreens, it'd be 5-foot minimum. So they're showing additional evergreen trees every 50 foot along that north property line.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
Just a follow-up question then to either one of you. And correct me if I'm following the wrong rule here, but under Section 7 supplementary performance standards relating to screening in planned employment center, this is a planned employment center, PEC 3. Says adjacent to property zoned or developed for residential use, the employment center uses, which this would be one, shall provide screening along the boundary adjacent to the residential property to screen residences within 300 feet of the property. And that's what your plan shows. Then it says the screening required in this section shall be at least 75% visually solid as viewed on any line perpendicular to the line of screening, shall consist of dense landscaping, landforms which provide required screening effect. maybe it does that or maybe it doesn't, but that's the rule. Does it meet that rule in your opinion?
In our opinion, it does with the addition of those additional evergreens. It's pretty substantial what's out there already. So with that addition,
Okay.
we feel it
So with the evergreens, and they're planted on what centers? How many feet apart are they?
50 feet.
50 feet. So the largest evergreen tree that you would probably plant out there is probably going to be 12 to 18 feet wide. I'm just curious, if you're planting these on 50-foot center, that's an evergreen tree there and an evergreen tree by the two doors. Most of the time, screening like this to be dense is going to have to be shoulder to shoulder and probably planted, 12 to, and no further than maybe 20 foot on center. I only observe this for the benefit of the county commissioners if they actually read this transcript or watch the video of this, that one of the most critical issues here to me that relates to the lighting issue is the screening. There's some natural screening there, but it's not going to be 75%, in the wintertime when all the leaves go off there. So that puts the real burden on the evergreen trees. There are some evergreen trees like green giant arborvitae, which can get up to 70 feet tall and some of them 40 to 60 feet at maturity. They're 18 feet wide. So I was looking at this and thinking, well, that would be something that if I were on the Board of County Commissioners, I would probably want to look at with reference to the impact of the lighting as to whether or not this in fact meets the screening requirements. And if I were on the Board of County Commissioners, I would probably say, well, you've made a good start, but these trees need to be of a kind that's going to get significantly higher. Perhaps, I don't know what they planted. I don't recall getting a name for it, but if I were the applicant, and if I were the county commissioners, I'd probably say, yeah, we need to shoulder these up. So we'll have at some point in the future, 40 to 60 foot tall trees. And as you can imagine, the degree to which those would screen out any issue with the lights would be highly significant and of significant benefit to those homeowners if they did that rather than a occasional evergreen on 50-foot centers. So that's my comment on the screening to the BOCC. I think they ought to consider that. But 50-foot on centers is one of the considerations that I noted when I, suggested significant changes to the lighting because the screening was inadequate in my opinion. So that's my comment on the lighting.
Thank you.
This is Kelly Rast. I will echo what Commissioner Rod said. And I actually I do have a picture of what it looks like right now. And it is pretty bare in certain spots. I mean, so I would agree that the landscaping probably needs to be a little more extensive and a little more clear. Which brings me, I have a question for you, Michelle. Is there a reason on this application there wasn't more concise verbiage? There's a lot where it says anticipate, approximately, with as far as like the time of hours and stuff. Is there a reason it wasn't like nailed down to, I mean, especially when you're saying 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
That's what the narrative said. So if these are things that the board would like to change in the stipulations, that's something that you go ahead and do so. I mean, if you'd like to say 7.
I just feel like
In
Kelly
the
Rast,
stipulations, it talks about shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I mean, that we
you crunched it down.
solidified
Okay.
that.
I just want to make sure that that's going to be followed. And then Kelly Ross, I do have a question regarding the practice field. So is that to assume that while some teams actually have their formal practices, then other teams are coming in and practicing at the same time and warming up so that from a traffic study standpoint, numbers and stuff that we have to account for those people coming and warming up?
That's more of a business question that would probably be better answered. by
Okay, because
the
there's really
applicant.
nothing that addresses exactly what's going on the practice field. And then the other question regarding the traffic study, or just to get numbers kind of figured out, would be, at one point, it talks about practices can be anywhere from 1 to 1.5 hours, but then another time it says that the fields will be staggered in 15-minute increments. So there just seems to be a lot of, I guess, things that aren't staying consistent, or how do they even figure out those schedules? So, and these are just things that just, to me, this is a lot of numbers of people, and just a little bit of something going wrong could tip the scales. So that's why I just wanted to bring that out and ask if there's any more clarification on those.
And again, that's something we would ask the applicant. That's their traffic study.
Okay, and then if the schools are closed for holiday or whatever, would the fields be used during those times?
They would be limited to what is stipulated for the hours of operation.
Okay. And then for the games on the weekend, does that include tournaments?
Games and tournaments shall only be played in the indoor fields Friday through Sunday is the stipulation.
Okay. I just want to clarify all that so I know my numbers are right. Thank you.
Michelle, this is Ken. Would, we have a very extensive traffic study, impact study that exists. Is that best explained in summary by you, by the applicant?
By the applicant.
Applicant? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any questions before we move to applicant? Great. Thank you for the update. If we can hear now from the applicant.
Chair, good evening. Kirk Peterson, members of the board. Nice to see you all. And I'm responding to questions if that's what I took the
That'd be
the
perfect.
motion to come to the podium. So I'd be,
No,
happy
that's
to
fine. I
answer
was just gonna, we have a very nice traffic impact study, and I wanted to see if you'd be able to walk us through and give us a quick summary of
for sure.
the effort that went into that document, please.
Yes, sir. So the application, the traffic study, I should say, for this application looked at 4 intersections. It looked at 199th Street. It looked at 202nd Terrace, which is just to the north of the site. As you go into that neighborhood, it kind of loops around back to Metcalf. You have 199th. You have 206th Street, which is just south of us, the small industrial property. And then you have 207th Street. So we always start by saying, what was the scope of the traffic study? And it was those 4 intersections. The traffic study consultant went out and took actual traffic counts from each of those intersections using a camera. So that's the baseline status quo data that they used. And then they went in and they used the Institute of Engineers Traffic Generation Manual, which you'll hear people say ITE, right? It's the ITE manual that all projects in the United States use to look at traffic, because we have the baseline from the cameras, but we need to understand, well, what would this project layer on top of that? So the ITE manual was used specifically, and sometimes you can't quite find in the ITE manual your project, if you know what I mean, like Chuck E. Cheese. Okay, is that more of a this or a that? This, we just happen to have a very specific for ITE manual code for soccer complexes. And the reason I took a minute to say that is, again, maybe I'll be up here another day and we won't have a good code and we'll have to talk more about it. But this one actually means that across many soccer complexes in the United States, they've gone out and they've aggregated all the information for traffic and counts, and they put that into an average for what a complex with 6 fields like this would generate in terms of traffic. So we have our intersections, we have our baseline counts from cameras, and then we have the ITE manual, making an educated guess based on real data across the United States as to what this would generate. Another thing we look at, and I'm staying high level, we can get into, and you can point me to a page and we can talk about it. A couple more high level points. Another item would be on any traffic study, we talk about level of service, or LOS, as the traffic engineers say, and you get the grading system, right? You get A through F. And so traffic engineers say this every time. Understand it's not like school. A C is not bad, that sort of thing. You hear it really when you get into the down to the E and F, and maybe start looking at it at D. That's when you have issues and perhaps recommendations. So here, the intersections would all operate with the project at an LOS B, which again, you can look to your own staff too, not just me, but that's excellent. There's no recommendations to address anything when you're at level of service B. By the way, I'm sorry, level of service defined as how long does somebody have to wait at that intersection before they can make their movement. So no issues there. We talked last time about, you might remember, about back when the project was configured differently, that first round that had the site moved, and there was a suggestion in the original traffic study for a southbound left, right? Left southbound making a left end. And we explained last time that that in the final study that was produced when the final iteration of the plan came about, because there was two separate drives now and the traffic would be separated, some people going into the indoor facility to the north and some people using the southern drive for the outdoor fields, the traffic consultant said, look, given that distribution, I don't see the pressure to put in any sort of southbound turning lane. So that was another key point in the traffic study. Beyond that, I would say, and you can have me go deeper if you want on this, but it also always talks about peak hour. It finds during the week and on the weekend, what is the peak hour? That means in the whole day, when there's traffic, what will be the top hour for the most traffic generated? And in this particular study, the consultant identified during the week that 4:30 to 5:30 would be the peak time for traffic generation. And then on Saturday, it would be from 12:45 to 1:45. And then I think I'll stop there, Chairman, but you can tell I'm happy. Those are all, I think, the macro comments. And then just happy to talk about any details you'd like.
So the recommendations that they kind of talked about here on page 6, I believe it was, is that note that the roadway would support this project with the stipulations of what staff report indicated without any additional improvements.
Yes, sir. 6 and 7, just like people following along. That's right. Starting on page 6, going to page 7.
Any questions?
Yeah, Kelly Ross, I have a question. So on like page 4, where it says in and out total, are
Yes,
they,
ma'am.
is that per hour that they're expecting 65 cars in per hour?
Close. Let's refine it. Yeah, you're close. So it's talking about in the table, this is table 3, right? On page 4 is your question.
Correct.
Starting with the top of that table, you can see in the upper right-hand corner, it's labeled PM peak hour. So we go back to the 4:30 to 5:30 during a weekday, given base traffic, like we said, and then what the trip gen says that would be generated. It's saying a total cars during that exact hour estimated of 99, and then your eyes were right. You go to the right of that, and the traffic engineer breaks it down. That'd be 65 in and 34 out during that peak hour on a weekday.
So that would be your high end.
Yes.
Based on this.
Okay. Kelly Ross, I guess the thing is when you add up the number of people, and obviously you kind of have to estimate, you take 15 players per field, add in coaches, you got to assume parents, sometimes a second parent might come.
Although there's
And
no
then-
games in, if you're okay with me going back and forth with you, remember, there's no games during the week. And so
Right.
this isn't any spectators, but please keep going.
Well, but parents like to watch and mom might take and then dad shows up after work. There's a lot of different scenarios of where, where mom may drop off, dad comes afterwards, or a sibling, or, there are, but then we also have this practice field where now you've got, overlap. So it just seems like there's far more than 65 cars coming just to accommodate those hours. And like I said, it's hard because it's a little bit inconsistent as far as whether, do we know the practices are an hour long, hour and a half long, because that can fluctuate. And then also are they staggered? Are they not staggered? Like, I just feel like to say 65, that seems really on the low end of the amount of people that potentially could be there. And we're also looking at an ideal situation where you don't have bikers on the road, which you often see on Metcalf. You don't have a farm equipment going down, which I've been stuck behind many times. You don't have just that odd situation where the cars are spaced just perfectly, where it's kind of hard to get out, one way or the other, so it sort of backs things up just a little bit. So that's a lot of my concern, is these numbers err on the low side compared to what you can actually realistically, plus realistically assume that there could be more, account for more numbers. And then when I was, just out of curiosity, regarding traffic studies and where they get these numbers, I was kind of surprised to read, and specifically from, the numbers, the ITE, there is a lot of scrutiny. In fact, and this is an article that I did pull up, and it references many other articles, and it's from April of 2023. But it is talking that these numbers is ITE is, basically from a industry standard is not even going to probably hold up in court. So I just feel like there's a lot of that we're basing something really, really important kind of on the low end of stuff and on numbers that right now in the industry, they're kind of thinking is not really a good industry standard anymore. And that's somewhat concerning when we have kids. And, my other point of that too is that if there's going to be more development, there's going to be more things going down south on Metcalf. And if this swallows up all the potential on Metcalf and the next person who comes in, that just, and I know can't look at it that way, but I just feel like there needs to be a shared responsibility here of what may or may take place with the road. So one of the thoughts is, do you put a bond up just in case this traffic study, may not be as accurate as we thought, and there are problems running into it because Metcalf Road is a little bit of a unique road. I'm sure on this ITE thing, it doesn't account for farm equipment or bikers or a country style life, that all of a sudden we realize, okay, this really wasn't practical for us and we're running into issues. I really worry about the accountability side on the county's part and once these things are passed. And if anybody watched the zoning board meeting in January, that was a good example of where we had 2 CUPs that had been expired for quite some time. So it happens. And it's really hard to pass stuff that might have issues when we know accountability after the fact is really lagging. So
That was a lot of stuff. That's good.
that was a lot of stuff. Oh, but here's sorry, Kelly asked a question. How did you come up with 15% would come from southbound? How did you figure that?
Should we do that and then go back to
Sure.
the 3 or 4 things? Okay, so let's turn everybody, because you're following, but let's have everybody follow the right page. So if we turn to the next page, which is page 5,
Mhm.
we get to the distribution analysis. That's table number 5. And I'm going to summarize. We could go really into weeds on each of those lines, but what it's effectively saying, in fact, the paragraph just below the table, if you run your eyes over that, what it says is during the weekdays, which seems to be what we're focusing on right now, it's actually 35% to and from the south, 65% to and from the north, but your brain is right on. You're remembering the 15% that was on the weekends is 15% to and from the south, and then 85% to and from the north.
I think somewhere, as Kelly asked, somewhere I read that they were assuming 85% of the soccer players would come from the north and 15 from the south. But
So on the weekend, that's
Just on the
exactly what
weekend.
the traffic study says. And then during the week, it's shifted a little more, 35% to and
yeah,
from the
I
south.
guess I'm like, how do they know where these soccer players are coming from? Because even if they come from the south, there's a huge argument that you would drive all the way to 199th Street and just drive the short way south on Metcalf versus get off at 223rd and do 2.5 times on Metcalf. So again, it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, this kind of sounds good. We can kind of, strap it to these numbers, but it's not really true information. So-
Where you're 100% right, and then if you don't mind, I have written down 3 main points you had and just try to illuminate those a little bit. But before that prefatory, if anybody ever tells you that a traffic study is a promise, down to the nth degree or one, it is called traffic science. Literally, smart people have degrees, and it's all data driven. But it's absolutely still a best, very educated estimate to guide planners and bodies like this and developers like us. So just to be clear, I'm not defending down to a margin of error of 1% or something. But again, they're very educated guesses. And kind of going into the first point that I wrote down that you made was really, can we trust the IT manual? Because there was actually in the packet, I believe back when, I think maybe the article you're referring to.
It's a different one.
Okay, I saw one back when in the packet. And while anybody can write anything and have an opinion, and I'm very glad we live in a country like that, that's a very outlier opinion. I will say, because whether we're doing a new Kauffman Stadium or whatever we're going to call it, right, downtown, real example, and looking at
Just,
traffic.
I'm going to interrupt one sec. Kelly Ross,
Sure.
this does come from the Washington Supreme Court when they upheld a ruling and said that they would no longer use it as a standard. So
That was
this isn't an opinion. It's not an opinion piece, but I do hear what you're saying.
Fair enough. And that was,
Go ahead.
that was for rules of evidence. That's a totally different thing than what we're doing here for development. It was that's different. But what I'm saying is, it's not like you're getting a proposed project here that's based on a certified traffic engineer's traffic study that's been reviewed by the county, and we're asking you to go out on a limb and do something that's very atypical to give it credence, right, as a guidance document that has validity. Whether we're doing, as I was going to say, a new baseball stadium downtown, in other words, I'm trying to say something big, right, or the airport, these are all real examples, firsthand knowledge, or a little preschool in your neighborhood, everybody will hire a traffic engineer, will go to the IT manual, will take counts, kind of what I described. So this is, I respect you if you endorse those articles that you think all of that is unreliable, but what I can tell you is I would disagree, but I would disagree based on this is what we do in every project. So I think it's reliable enough to give good guidance, as your county engineer has agreed to. But I hear your points, just trying to address them. That's one. The second point was just a quick question that was raised about, well, wait a second, how long are these practices? The reason it says 1 to 1.5 hours is depending on the team and the situation and the agreement we have with that club. They could be 1 hour, they could be 1.5. That's why it says that. We're not locked down to one or the other, and they will be staggered. That is something that every soccer complex I know, at least in whether it's games, which remember we don't have games other than indoor on the weekends, or practices all across the metro, with just getting back from Orlando with a soccer player, right? Doing soccer like every day of the week, they're always staggered. They're always trying to keep, everything from happening at one time. So that answers that, hopefully. And then you ask a good, I'm just going to say, you ask a good question. You said, well, how does I'm going to use the exact numbers, peak hour during the week, why are there 65 in and 34 out? And your mind is doing math and saying, it seems like there should be more. So intuitively, I agree with you intuitively, right? I cross-examined and went in deeper and all that. So I'm not going to do a 30-minute sort of thesis paper right here, but give you a few more variables involved here, but also remind us this is based on real data from other soccer projects that have 6 fields, or they adjust it for how many fields, right? So they say per field. A few other things. Remember that we have, and I don't mean to make it too personal, but like, at least this is my life. I just came here directly from a 6 o'clock practice at Shields and drove down 135th Street really fast to get here. So carpooling, tons of carpooling. Every club with each of my kids that we've ever been on, there's lots of carpooling, which is going to adjust numbers down, right? Do I know exactly how many miss or asked? I don't. It's going to vary from team to team and project to project and all that, but there's a lot of carpooling that happens. Staggered start times, we already talked about. Coaches, which there's actually a number of coaches. Coaches usually stay for a block, right? It's not that common that a coach comes and does 1 hour, 1.5 hour practice. They usually come for the whole evening. Some families, and this is a personal one too, some families have multiple players and then also have goalie practice, which is separate from regular practice. So you end up staying, you're in the count of using the fields, but you're staying for a longer period. You're not another car in and another car out multiple times. And then lastly, again, I promised I wasn't going to go on and on and on, but this helped me a lot because I'm being honest, when I first looked at this months ago, I was like, I need to evaluate that and ask questions. This helped me a lot, that if you were to take this peak hour of 65 trips in, 65 cars going in, which is just about 1 per minute, right? And you picture what is 1 per minute, 1, 2, 3, right, to 60, and there was 1 car that came. And I doubled that. Let's say the traffic, the ITE manual or whatever, there's weird circumstances and it's off by 100%. There's 200% the traffic at peak. We'd be talking about 1 car every 30 seconds. And for me, at least, that's what you get the big bucks. You'll decide whether that's compelling to you. But for me, I was like, man, there's just not a lot of traffic generated, more than a field, right? Of course. So I understand that, but not a lot of traffic that certainly is going to overwhelm Metcalf, which is why the traffic engineer reached the conclusion that they reached. I think I touched on each of your questions, but if you have more, I'm happy to talk about them.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Peterson, Fred Wingert, soccer complexes in, say, Johnson County, are there any other soccer complexes that are on a narrow 2-lane road like Metcalf is?
I mean, you're having me race around. I do know that, I know you're saying narrow 2-lane road, but what I usually think about is like arterial. I mean, this is, I mean, I'm gonna defer to the real expert in the room, but I think in terms of classification and plan, Metcalf is like the ultimate thoroughfare. So, kind of disagreeing with the premise of the question, but I'd have to sit and think of every complex we go to. I mean, Swope, actually, we go to Swope Park all the time, and that's a really narrow entry drive as you come in there. You have to give me a little more time to think through all the parks, but it's 2-lane, actually, no Latha.
Heritage, for example, has a major 175th Street, major infrastructure, broad shoulders, 135th, which you just came down by Shields, has 2 lanes both way, a median. I don't think we're comparing apples to apples. Mr. Chairman, we have not heard from the applicant. He was not at, he and she, I don't think, at our first meeting. Are they going to get an opportunity to address us about the project?
You want to respond to that?
I did want to be polite because
No, you're fine.
yeah, we feel like we're here on these 3 issues, and if you have questions, you can ask me, and that's been from the neighborhood meeting all the way along. We're together, but I am the spokesperson.
So the
Yeah,
applicant
questions.
who's going to run this, who's basically standing behind this, isn't even going to address,
So
stand up and
again,
address this?
doing this is a privilege. I do this for a living. I get to be part of projects from beginning to end, neighborhood meetings, design, all the way through. This is 100% typical. And while it may make you laugh, I'm not sure why you're laughing, but it may make you laugh. This is entirely typical. And if you have questions, please ask and I'll get you an answer.
Thank you. Ron, Ken?
I do have some questions, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of this. My questions really go to lighting, to the applicant. So anybody else have any questions about traffic? Nail it out. All right. Obviously, lighting to me, and I'm just talking about me, how I see this, but all my comments are really directed to the Board of County Commissioners, assuming they'll read these at least and consider them as part of a remand. The most significant impact of this facility to me is the potential for lighting. So I've got a few questions for you. Number one, why, since you've got these 70-foot light standards, you've got basically four standards on each field.
11 total. Yeah.
11 total. And you've got the Musco lighting at the top at 70 feet, and then you've got another light at 45 feet.
Correct.
What's the purpose of the 45-foot light?
The 45-foot light, I don't know if staff wants to put a site plan up or you can look in your packet. Is it in there somewhere? Okay. Let's see what I like the best. This will work. So the 11, Mr. Richardson, the 11 are the blue, right? Those are the 70-foot ones. And as you said, on these poles, you have a 45-foot tall light on that same pole that's lighting the parking area here. So that's the purpose. The
Okay,
sole
so
purpose.
they're
Nothing to do with this, nothing to do with the
We're
soccer.
not feeling, okay. Your client apparently has selected Musco lighting. And according to your site plan, all of the 70-foot lighting is their TLC, total lighting control lighting. And according to Musco, they have all kinds of things to say about total light control. They say the LED is simply the newest tool for addressing the same issues that have endured over decades: how to put more light on the field, spill less around it, reduce energy consumption and operating costs. Our total light control system achieves a level of precision never before possible. We create controlled light, not floodlights. The patented customized optics of our TLC for LED system can control the intense rifle shot of LED light like no other lighting solution. We put a higher percentage of light precisely where you want it on the field, and players can track the flight of the ball like never before. Then they say with TLC for LED, we're able to carve out the area to be lighted with pinpoint precision, dramatically cutting off any impact on the surrounding area. No more worrying about glare or spill impacting the light around your field, and it opens up new opportunities for where the fields can be located within a community. We believe in preserving the darkness as much as creating light. For you, this means affordable LED sport lighting capable of creating brilliantly focused field for players and spectators, and a welcome curtain of darkness for your neighbors with less energy consumption and lower operating costs. Do you endorse that as something that's descriptive of what you believe your lighting will do?
Not just on this project, but just Musco, be careful not to do too much of a commercial, but Musco is a national leader. I've done projects with them, and what they're describing with this generation of lighting is absolutely spot on. In fact, when we sat down with them to design the lighting for this field, we got out the Stillwell lighting standards and went through them and to meet every single one of them. And I truly believe, looking in the eyes, and we can talk about it if you want, I truly believe we meet each one of them because this technology is so good.
Right, okay. So in looking at this, and I'm kind of putting myself, if I knew this was going to be there and I'm a neighbor, I've already mentioned one thing is I think more evergreen plantings for a denser around the north property line, which is not a huge expense, would be a masterful stroke to help screen whatever light does come out, because it's not that you can't see it, it's there.
Mr. Richardson, I'm going to pause you, I think, to respect this because I don't want to lose that point. It's such a key factual point that you wouldn't necessarily understand because we've never gotten quite this deep. There's only so much time and questions. So there's certainly what we all of us know, light pollution, right? And we're thinking about, okay, can I read a book, right? How far away and there's still light hitting me? Well, you've seen from, again, I don't know if it's in this slideshow, but it's the Arizona pictures really fast. I'm going to contrast to get to your point, contrast something. Sorry about that. F5, right? So we can see, I think we can all agree that there's no light pollution beyond the fields, right? You can't read a book by it. Foot candles don't go beyond the perimeter of the fields. And that's true here. That's 100% true here. What you're asking is a nuanced, really good question. The phrase that I'm going off my projects. The phrase that the lighting Musco would use is perceived glare. That's the term. And that's different. That is translated synonym would be, can I see the point of light?
Yeah.
And so on this particular project, actually, this is kind of a funny angle, but I know this to be true because I've seen the maps. I've seen the perceived glare maps. There's 0% perceived glare at the property line with the neighbors to the north. Now, again, translate that. What does that mean? That means anywhere at any home, if I can see through the existing trees and the trees that would be planted, and I look and I see the top of the pole, where in the past with a bunch of fields in the area, you would see some sort of light, right? It's how close you are to how bright it is in your eyes. You literally see almost like a black hole, if you know what I mean, or a eclipse. You will not see the top of the pole. You may be able to, you'll see the pole because there's light shining down on the field. So you'll see the pole. You cannot see the top because there's 0% perceived glare, and it's all an angle thing, as you know, right? That's part of how they set up the tall poles and they shine down. You cannot see the light source at all. So sorry, it took a little time to run up to it, but it's different than foot candles because that's not an issue. It's the
I
perceived.
agree. And I think the 0.4 foot candle issue, I mean, I've looked at your lighting charts and they appear to strike down the lighting. So taking what you say as appropriate comment and looking at your pictures here, there's one significant difference between what you're showing us here and what you're going to do. And that is none of these poles from what I can see, have another light at 45 feet that's not TLC controlled. And I know you said it's going to shine down on these walkways, et cetera. But are you not shooting yourself in the foot with that 45-foot light? Because obviously the ones I've looked at, even in the Musco documents, which I took the time to read
That's great.
everything they had on the internet anyway, I don't see anything where they're mounting, 45-foot lights underneath the top ones. And I'll concede to you, I think Musco has a excellent product. I think you can deliver what this picture shows. I think that's a reasonable approach, but now you're sticking a 45-foot light up there to light something else. 45 foot is significantly higher even than the Stillwell community plan lighting, which would like to see something lower. But if you're going to have a conditional use permit, I would point out to the county commissioners at least that I have a significant concern about the impact of those 45-foot lights because I'm not sure what they're doing. They don't appear to be shining on the field. They're 4.5 stories high. You may have a beautiful field, but now you're sticking those lights on there, and I noticed none of these folks do. So why are those?
It's
four-
just, sorry, I wasn't clear then on, so the parking lot that you can see, Mr. Richardson here, the parking lot does not have parking lot lights. We were able to get rid of all parking lot lights by lighting with the 18-foot full cutoff building lights, building mounted lights, and then this part of the parking lot with the 45-foot full cutoff lights that shine just down on the parking lot here. That, I think that's actually a good thing because we don't have to have any light poles around the parking lot, which frankly, when you look at a Target or a Kohl's at night or a Walmart, that's what you see all lit up is the parking lot with all those poles. So frankly, we think it's a good thing, and it is full cutoff, so you cannot see the light source from the neighborhood to the north.
Okay. So your position with the BOCC would be what we see in these pictures. I'm sure they've seen those as well. That's what we're going to see. It's going to be direct, focused, precision lighting on the field, consistent with what Musco's representation say. And you're saying these 45-foot lights are going to be directed away from the field, but they're full cutoff and they shouldn't be any more observable than the 70-foot lights from the neighboring property.
0%. That was in our design criteria for Musco as well.
Okay, okay. Now, I noticed in the county commissioner's commentary, and I just want to clarify this, because I was kind of surprised when she said it, but Commissioner Allenbrand said, she's a soccer mom. She loves soccer. She's been on 2 planning boards and that she's got letters of support for this. And this meets the guidelines of the dark sky, folks. Now I'm familiar with that. That to meet that would, unless I didn't see a dark sky certification because you'd be waving it in our face, I would assume if you had that. But is she right or wrong about the dark sky?
I mean, somebody's going to have to ask her directly because I'm not entirely sure, but here's my best guess. I think it's probably right. I think if I remember right, there was some discussion, it's certainly in the staff packet, and I think there was some discussion of the Stillwell lighting standards. And Stillwell, although I don't think Stillwell's like certified dark sky, but certainly holds itself out as aspirationally dark sky and all that. We've all heard that a lot, which is great. And I think in short, and I'm not going to make this really short, but I think what she's saying is, are they only on when needed? Well, I think, well, you weren't at the neighborhood meetings, but we went into detail about that, how it's controlled literally by the owner's phone. If it's not rented, it's not on, it goes off right when the rental's done. So only on when needed, only light the area that's needed. And that would be like what we just looked at with that Arizona picture, no spillage, beyond the area that's needed to be lit, no brighter than needed. I didn't say this yet, but very fast, I'm going through the criteria. It's the lowest effective foot candle. And I asked for some examples. I said first, like, what are the high schools in the area right now? And it was about 50-foot candles. That's kind of standard, apparently. And then I said, well, what was our Blue Valley North project? And I talked about this one time in front of you guys, but it's a multi-purpose turf field that we put in, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that, at Blue Valley North High School. And that was 40. So I was at 50. That was a 40-foot candle. And then this proposed, I have to remember the exact, it's less than the Blue Valley North. And that was by design at the beginning because we weren't naive to the fact of, that there was Stillwell lighting standards and we wanted to have it be no brighter than it had to be. So this gets as low as it can be to still be high quality for the kind of activities that would happen here. And then lastly, it says it should be, in so many words, fully shielded. And that was the whole back and forth we had about 0% perceived glare. One last item that I don't think has ever come up, but it is really important. So when we go watch football games or we watch baseball games, there has to be ball tracking lights. And that means there has to be some lights that are pointed up or you lose the ball, right? In soccer, and including here, we have 0 ball tracking lights, meaning everything is face down. There's nothing facing up into the sky. So back to I'm speculating for she's watching, speculating that that's the kind of thinking and kind of generally saying dark skies, but you're right. There's no certification for us. There's no certification for Steel.
I didn't think there was, but I was just curious. Okay, just a couple of more points.
Real quick on that, the Aubrey Township is seeking with Dark Sky International to get designated as a dark sky community. So those efforts had started at the township level, but haven't migrated to anything fruitful yet.
And I'd endorse that, which I strongly support that effort. But that's a discussion for another day, I suppose. But with reference to your facility, on the lighting side of it, I think that from at least my review, particularly of most of the recognized literature out there, that kind of rates the fields from a practice field to a sort of a low-level field to a high school field to a true sports field, stadium, et cetera. Each one of those has slightly different lighting requirements and lighting standards. For example, in my review, the lowest intensity fields generally have 4 light standards per field and whatnot. You answered one question because I thought, well, you were trying to sort of punch up the lighting of the field with 4 light standards by adding a 45-foot light, which, yeah, you've answered that question. So in the sense that you did 2 things, which I think, regardless of how we decide this tonight, I think the applicant deserves significant credit for. And that is that when you had the neighborhood meeting, you rejiggered this thing to put all of the fields on the south end and open up a significant buffer zone between these fields and the adjoining residences. I think the lighting that you've chosen to do with Musco is probably the, I guess we call it the best for the circumstances about which we have concern. And I'm saying this all from the standpoint of, if it's gonna be there, if it happens to be there at the end of all of this, then the lighting standards and the way that you have redesigned the field would appear to be about as good as you could possibly do on that site. Reduce the number of fields from 9 to 4 or 5, 4. Well, how many fields are there?
4 plus 2 is the way I think of it, 4 out.
And I know there are certainly other concerns, but the commissioners ask us to specifically, review the lighting concerns. So I have some other comments later about this whole thing generically, about how the county commissioners approach this and what I think the real issue here is. But I want to put on the record for the commissioners and for the applicant that I think that you've done a really excellent job trying to figure out how you could put this there with the least impact to the neighbors, recognizing that light is light and you can't, you can't make it not be there. But with the current technology, LED lighting and the way you're doing it, it would appear to be, to me, about as good as you can do. So with that said, I'll see if anybody else has any comments. Most of my comments when we get to it are going to be about how conditional use permits are really considered by the BOCC and some of the concerns I have about how the county commissioners dealt with your particular application. Thank you for your answers. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? And Dan? Thank you, appreciate it.
Chair.
All right, we have discussion among the board.
Well,
Oh, I was just gonna, Kelly Rast, for for it to be a dark light or a dark sky field, there might be some issues if, according to this, they recommend that locate fixtures no closer to the property line than 4 times the mounting height of the fixture. So I'm not exactly sure where these sit to the property line, but if it's at 70 feet, they would need to be 280 feet from the project line. The other thing that might not make it qualify was that that they do not recommend the light fixtures being taller than any of the structures. So it would be, I don't think it would qualify for a dark sky certificate for probably those reasons, just for that clarification, if I'm reading that right. I did have one question. I don't know if this goes back to the restrooms, like a facility for restrooms for 150-ish people. They're just going to do a holding tank. Is that correct? Can you repeat
There's
that?
one, the proposal is one holding tank for the building and then one for the little restroom facility. And based on comments from Johnson County Environmental,
They're good.
it's possible. They're just going to have to pump them regularly.
Okay. Thank you. I meant to ask that earlier. Sorry.
Rod, Fred Winger, I just wanted to clarify, it's accurate that they did move the fields away from the homes, but in the process, the very first informational meeting of the Wolf Greens, many folks brought up the concern that we have a special needs park that's literally right next door. So right here, there's special needs park. Kids with autism, Asperger's go there. A soccer field right there, doesn't, certainly not conducive. But the applicant at no time brought anything to say that it was okay. It was kind of just ignored the whole way. It's brought up by several of the citizens in the area. So that's not what we're reviewing tonight, but to be fair, the folks with special needs that use that park on a regular basis, we're not doing them any favors.
Noted.
This
Just At the same time, real quick though, there are 2 soccer fields or a all-purpose field that is designed to be right behind that pavilion in that big open area. We've just not developed that yet, or that's not been developed by Johnson County Parks and Rec. But that is in the planning when funding happens. And a lot of it's because year 1, they have to prepare the field, year 2, before you finally use it. And so there hasn't been identified need, but there is soccer all-purpose fields that are supposed to be developed and built there for us.
Ms. Kelly Ross, I think what's hard with jumping into being right in with this project is that it is much larger in many different ways than anything else we have going on in Stillwell. And so it kind of sets a whole nother precedent per se. And we've always used certain criteria, even for I know one of the big buzzword and fear words is like, oh, it's an industrial park. We don't want an industrial park on that property. Well, we have industrial park just south of it, and we've always been very mindful of whatever goes in there is, very minimally invasive. So we're looking at a project that now has lighting like Stillwell has never seen before, when every other applicant, we've always, been very harsh on no lighting, or it has to be this or that. And now we're looking at 70-foot poles. And again, I commend them for the lights that they are putting in, but when you still drive by there, that area is going to be lit up versus dark. We're putting a structure that's 45 feet high. The baseball building is between 20 and 25 feet. So it's a much larger building. And then we're talking about, from a patronage standpoint, outside of Stillwell Elementary, we might be looking at, a patronage that's, volume, the largest in Stillwell. So we've got 3 areas where this thing supersedes anything else in Stillwell. So it's a lot to chew off, but then it's like, well, we better make sure this is right, because now we're setting the precedent for the next thing to come in, and we don't have much room to stand on. So part of the board's problem is, we're supposed to have a feel of what we want the community to be based on what was design feedback. And I get everybody wants more soccer fields. Everybody wants more stuff for their kids. But also there's a lot of people want Stillwell to be a certain community as well. And this is going to remarkably change that standard and open that door for the standards to change from this day forward. So, and then if something's not right, the accountability portion is very difficult for me to swallow.
This is Ken. I still just struggle with the lighting. We've went through years of community meetings, sitting down with the community. The Stillwell Community Plan clearly spells out the fact that, this will change the whole characteristic of the community. And from the soccer field, the project, the traffic study, from that perspective, I'm comfortable with the project. I think when I look at the size of Metcalf, I equate it similar to up by Waste Management, the soccer complex that's up in that northern part of the, I don't know if it's Wyandotte or if that's still Johnson up there. And we've played on those fields, and those are 2 lanes in and out from both K7 and 435. But when I look at the lighting, even though I commend, and Rod really brought, I think, a good picture or light to it is potentially the right lighting, but Stillwell has made it so clear over and over that we just don't want these overhead lighting. I think Rod had made a comment, and he was actually part of the zoning board when Kansas City Power and Light, Evergy, in the parking lot and the way they did their lighting, and how I think everyone's so respectful of what Evergy ultimately did and the zoning board did at that time, because you don't have a parking lot that looks like Shields, or you don't have a parking lot that looks like Walmart. You've got something over there at 199th at that service center that is responsible, but still gets the job done. So I'm supportive of the project, except the lighting just does not, I just feel the lighting is a bigger characteristic. I think it's just, that puts it over the top from a Stillwell perspective of, that's not what everyone has expressed that they want in Stillwell. And so I just struggle with that. Although if you were going to do lighting, we're at least in the right direction.
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, these comments, again, I would hope the BOCC would consider. I can endorse everything my members of the board here have said about their concerns. But again, generally, if you're going to put a soccer facility at that location, I think the applicant's done a really good job of trying to make it work there. So here are my more general concerns. I'm concerned about how these conditional use permits tend to shove us towards zoning by exception. For example, I noticed in listening to the county commissioners, many of them said, well, this meets the PEC standard. It meets the PEC standard. It's, it's an industrial area, et cetera. Well, that is absolutely incorrect. This does not in any way meet the PEC standards for PEC 3. In fact, if I look at the permitted uses under section 4 at page 14-7 of Article 14, it lists every permitted use that the people that drafted this code considered appropriate for a PEC 3 area. And I think there are, I can count them up, but there are 19, 20, 27, looks like there are 27 different authorized uses as a matter of right under PEC 3, and none of them have anything to do with athletic fields, soccer fields, football fields, baseball fields, or anything else. They're clearly not there. But under section 4 of Article 23, we look at conditional uses which may be approved in certain zoning districts. And this is the one where it says, athletic field complexes for baseball, soccer, football, track, and the like, field houses, et cetera, are something that you can consider. But I find this language really troubling. And, sometimes you get in the weeds on these things and you see things that you go, what is that saying? This says that under these Group A conditional uses, it says, and I quote, Group A, conditional uses such as the following may be approved by the board in any zoning district other than PEC 1 and other than the planned adult district PAE. So if I'm to read this code right, you could essentially put an athletic field in any zoning district in the county as long as it's not PEC 1 or PAE. I don't know whether that's what they meant, but that's what it says. But so now the question is, all right, if that's the rule, then what about these conditional use permits? So I went back and looked at what I think the Board of County Commissioners and the community and the applicant and everything they're supposed to consider, we're supposed to consider. So it says this article, and this is Article 23, it says this article provides criteria and procedures for conditional uses which may be properly allowed upon consideration in each case. Among other things, the impact of those uses upon neighboring land in the community. So obviously the impact of a conditional use which is not otherwise allowed, particularly an athletic field, has to, we have to consider the impact on the neighbors. And that's what we've been talking about tonight. Conditional uses produce unique and special impacts because of their location, design, lifespan, size, method of operation, traffic circulation, and similar such characteristics, which impact on available provided public facilities so that each must be considered individually. So we've talked about the traffic study, we talked about traffic concerns. So it goes on to say that the board may deny requests which fail to satisfy standards and requirements contained herein, or which are, and I emphasize this, not in harmony with the purposes and interests of these regulations of the health, safety, and general welfare of the county. Well, how could a good old soccer stadium, injure anybody in that way? Well, the fact of the matter is, given the fact you could not ordinarily put these in a PEC3 district, apparently, according to the PEC3 standards. So now you've got to do it under a conditional use permit, and a conditional use permit shouldn't be granted if it's considered not in harmony with the purposes and interests of the regulations. So it says, all right, so what's our next step? Well, then the question is, can we put restrictions on it that would make it harmonize with the local community? And as I've told the applicant, and we've all kind of said that, they've done as good a job as you can probably do with putting what amounts to a unicorn in the middle of this particular property. So clearly we can, we or the Board of County Commissioners can put restrictions on this use, which would moderate or mitigate these uses. And if we can't do that, then probably it shouldn't be adopted. So the point I make here is that this goes to one of the other issues, they're asking for a 10-year application on this, and I can understand with the investment, they really need 10 years. But it seems disingenuous in some respects where the code makes it very clear that the maximum is 10 years. But every time we see a CUP, it's for 10 years, 10 years, 10 years, without any consideration given to the fact that, hey, the longer these goes out, it's effectively rezoning this land by exception to allow this use. So I have a visceral objection to just summarily rubber stamping 10 years on everything, including this project, if it's approved. I think if everything the applicant says is true, which it may well be, I have no reason to doubt that, there should be no problem with, nothing more than a 5-year CUP and then coming back after they prove their case. And if there's some particular problem, it could be addressed then. So we have the right to employ or impose a longer or shorter conditional use period than is required or enabled by these regulations. So we have that right to control that. I think that's something that they didn't ask us to specifically review, but it really goes to the whole point of this. If I look at Article 23 and under the guidelines we're all supposed to operate under, it says some things that I think are important here. One is that the conditional use will be designed, constructed, operated, buffered, screened, and maintained to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use will not be incompatible with the character of the area. Well, it is incompatible with both the residential area as well as the industrial area. As far as I know, there's nothing else in these industrial areas that would have all these 70-foot light standards, 45-foot light standards, be operating in the way that this does. Nothing wrong with the soccer stadium. I'm just saying the question is, are the Board of County Commissioners simply looking at this and saying, as one of the commissioners did, well, this is a $10 million benefit for our community. Let's put some dollar signs behind it and approve it. Well, I don't like that when they're supposed to be looking at whether this is harmonious with the neighborhood and the appropriate uses. The fact of the matter is it really isn't, and there's no way you can put enough lipstick on that to make it completely harmonious with the area. So it's a function of whether you can adequately mitigate the perceived problems with traffic, et cetera. And then they said it has to not only be compatible, but will not be hazardous or unduly disturbing to existing or planned future neighborhood uses and zoning. this is another concern I have, that the BOCC, and I suppose maybe us too sometimes, you zone the community, people build their homes, people rely on the existing zoning, people make their investment, people look at these rules, and then all of a sudden something comes on which people think's cool, like a soccer stadium, which it is, and which clearly we need for the community. But all of a sudden, it's like, we're going to overlook the fact that it's not harmonious with the area, and it is unicorn. We're going to go ahead and approve it and send it back to the East Consolidated Zoning Board. And then when it goes back to them, just kaboom, they approve it. Well, I object to that because there was not a single discussion at the BOCC about any of these critical issues that we've spent now probably 6 hours going through with the applicant, his client, and everything about, the issues that this could bring up. So, I think, my point is that in this particular case, I don't think, or I put it this way. If the Board of County Commissioners is going to approve this, no matter what we do, they need to get their facts straight, and they need to understand that this is not consistent with PEC 3 zoning. It's a unicorn in the area, a good unicorn. I like unicorns, but it's one that is going to produce impacts that are not consistent with either the existing industrial uses or the adjoining residential uses. Now, if I were the applicant, I would probably be thinking, evergreens that I don't know what kind they are or how high they're but if I were going to try to get that 75% density and really try to do something that would ultimately every year get better and better and better about screening the part of this that the neighbors are concerned about, I'd be planting some significant, green giant arborvitae or something along those that get 40 to 70 feet tall that are planted much, much closer together and maintain them. It's a small thing, but I think would go a very long way, particularly in the future, because when you're in the backyard of those properties and you've got very tall evergreens right there in your backyard, it'd be almost impossible to see any lights at all from this soccer stadium. I think that would be, I'm obviously pushing that, but that would be up to the applicant, I guess. I don't know that I really have anything more other than that. If I've forgotten anything. Oh, yeah, there is one more thing. I think also, and this is really important, so I again underscore this to the Board of County Commissioners. What is it that the BOCC expects us to do when we have a Stillwell community plan? And I asked last time, are we supposed to follow this Stillwell community plan? I know it's a guideline, it's not the rule. But yet it's like, well, we have this plan, we emphasize dark skies, we emphasize lighting concerns, we emphasize all these things. But then when a project like this comes along, which has community interest, obviously, for good reason, all that goes out the window. And it's like, yeah, we could follow it, but we're not probably going to do that here. I think that as we sit on this board, we get a lot of conditional use permits coming through. And so we're asked constantly to basically virtually rezone a little piece of property to accommodate somebody's specific use for either personal or profit reasons or community need. And we throw out all of these considerations that I just went through. And I was really not real happy when I listened to the BOCC talk about this. I know they talk about it at their agenda review, but these are significantly important things to this community. And Commissioner O'Hara, I thought, did a good job pointing that out to the BOCC, and she did vote to remand it. But the fact of the matter is, I'm looking at the comments of some of these folks that everybody seemed to think just because it's in a PEC district, that makes it all better. And they, and I was particularly concerned about comments by one of the commissioners about this being a $10 million a year growing need, industrial spots are good spots for it and all that. I don't know. I don't think that's accurate. But they ask us to review it, and so, you know, that's my thought, about it. I don't think, you know, lighting, I think if you're gonna put it there, the lighting's pretty darn good. Hours of operation, I'm not all that concerned about that, and traffic, I think it'll overload Metcalf if they get real busy, but probably not all that great. I think the bigger question here is, whether the Stillwell community plans matter. I think the bigger question is whether, the existing land uses are going to be required by the BOCC to swallow whatever comes next, no matter what. I don't think that's fair or appropriate. And I think if we have these CUPs, I think it's frankly, ridiculous to allow just maximum 10-year CUP terms, just because it says you can have a maximum CUP. I think we need a quicker time to see if the promises made by the applicants and that are ultimately approved by the BOCC are actually true, so that after a shorter period of time, we could make any necessary adjustments, to further moderate whatever problems they cause. That's it.
Kelly Rast, think that was excellent. Thank you, Rod, for that. And I totally agree with all that you brought up, and it has been very frustrating with the way things have gone and how they go up to the BOCC and stuff. But I would like to add, honestly, I think the hours of operation, I would be okay if they started earlier, like for high school practices. There may be some high school opportunities where, I mean, at least my kids were in school, a lot of seniors all seem to be done by noon or whatever. The possibility of letting them open up at 2 if there's high school age people that can do it. But I'd like to shut it down closer to 8, because 10 o'clock means it's going to be another 30, 40 minutes before everything is actually cleared out of there. And I just think that's awfully late, night after night after night. So I would recommend or want to offer from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. During the week. The weekends, that's fine. I'll go with that because it's a weekend night. And then I'd also almost suggest that they only start with 2 outside fields. And I mean, I just, you know, I don't want to see Metcalf get overloaded. I don't want to see one bad potential accident, which I, you know, it's always possible, but it's just to see ease into it or whatever. But I do agree, at some point, where are the hard lines as far as what we want for the community and stuff? And I still have a hard time with the lights. This will not, if Stillwell wants to be a dark community, this will kill it because it won't qualify, from what I understand. So that's what's hard with all this. And I agree, the BOCC doesn't really look at any of that. And we spend a lot of time and effort, you know, obviously tonight, there's no public comments, but I feel like, you know, the public comments on the other side don't really get that extra voice up at the BOCC level. I'd like to see more expression of both sides of the coin. I think it was Alan Brand that had asked, you know, could there be more higher intense industrial businesses that came in? And the answer was yes. Although that is correct, which I would, you know, question to know what that might be. But the answer could also be no, because basically everything else that we have in Stillwell in the PEC 3 is much less intensive. In fact, I guarantee you most of the people don't even realize that the stuff that's down there right now is actually industrial, considered industrial. So we need a more fair representation of what's taking place at these zoning boards at the BOCC level on behalf of our citizens, and just be fair on both sides, that both sides of the coin are heard. And I get they get our memos, but it is clear, or, you know, or the minutes or whatever they get, it is clear they don't read them fully because of the questions they ask. But Commissioner Rod, excellent done. Excellent on what you brought up.
Ken, any thoughts down there?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I'm the person that put in Johnson County 3-2. I was involved with Johnson County 3-2 20 years ago. We beat the city with lights. The county, through the rec, has beat the cities or county. They got out there with the lights before stuff happened. The problem here is the city there and the lights didn't get there before Stillwell. And so that's why the lighting's such an issue. This board, or excuse me, in my history of 25 years on a planning and zoning board, there have been conditional use permits for less than 10 years, for 5 or 3. That will make the, the owner pucker up a little bit because they have 5 years to perform. I like the idea about 2 outside fields lit, and I like your hours on 2 to 8 as well. So you're I'm tweaking it a little bit, but so that there's something there to send back to the commissioners to at least consider 5-year conditional use, 2 to 8 p.m. I think is reasonable, and 2 outside. Then after 5 years, if this thing works together, then you look at the big enchilada at a later date. And we may not be here in 5 years, this board, but at least we've set it up to be, at least we've set it up to the point that there's some accountability here. That's what I'm looking at.
The current hours of operation are proposed as 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week.
But the outdoor is 4 to 10. If I remember that correctly.
The stipulation number 6 just says the hours of operation shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. I didn't see a stipulation limiting the outdoor.
Oh, Kelly Rath, sorry, I'm looking at the narrative and it does say for the outside fields, Monday through Thursday, beginning at approximately 4 p.m. and ending at approximately 10 p.m. So
Yeah.
So right now, it would still be a 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Then I would
7
do-
days a week.
2 to 8.
Dan, you still there with us?
You bet. Thanks, Ken.
Any comments to share, please?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Rod and Kelly both put out there. I have some other, I guess, concerns. I mean, the lighting obviously is a huge thing. I'll just kind of, the lighting, the hours. I mean, 70 feet, that's the height of the White House. I know this from my time in Washington, D.C., that's, you're going to be able to see that, from a long ways away. I get that the lighting is pointed down, but you're still able to see it. It's still there on your horizon. So the lighting thing to me is just a huge deal. The hours is another thing. I mean, who wants this right behind them, until 10 p.m.? If you had young children, my kids go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. Do they want to have a soccer field, 50 feet from behind them? I too watched started watching the Johnson County Commissioners part, and I got a little disgusted because I felt like we weren't very well represented in what we were trying, the concerns we were trying to express, I guess is the way I would put it. For instance, when we saw this, there were 4 letters for it in our packet. And somehow there was, afterwards, there was a bunch more letters. Obviously, there was some support drummed up for it, et cetera. And there was 29. I actually know a lot of people on there. And most of these people a lot of them live very, up by Overland Park, 121st and Antioch and Schweitzer and but not one of them would I consider they don't live in Stillwell. So yeah, they're not impacted by this. One of them that actually sent a letter in is someone I know very well, and I know they drive their kids to Lawrence, Kansas for football. So is an aversion to driving? Sure, whatever. My bigger concern is what happens, because I mean, I may be wrong in this, but I could have sworn we were told this wasn't a big moneymaker, that this wasn't try to make it, eke out some profit, whatever. I think it was, maybe they were, whatever. I'm not going to judge anyone's intentions. But what happens if their kids graduate and and it's not making money, and then Stillwell is stuck with these lights, stuck with this building, stuck with this traffic, and then who knows who's going to want to use it after that? And I think we're making an exception here that we don't need to make. It isn't a fit. It isn't there. We talked about, I heard on the Johnson County Commissioners, that they were like, oh, well, it's already, industrial. This is going to be less impactful. No, it's not. I mean, go over there and look at the companies that are there right now. They shut down at 5 o'clock. Most of them are, some companies that shut down even earlier than that. You look at like Messengers and those kind of companies that are out there. They're very low impact. They're in, they're out. They're not 24 hours a day. They're certainly not putting up giant lights, and they're certainly not, high traffic. It's just not a fit. And but I echo exactly, Rod, I love how you actually have read the regulations. Anybody knows me knows I'm not a big regulation reader necessarily, but I kind of judge it on whether I think it's a fit. I feel like I'm here to represent the people of my area, and I live in Stillwell, and I live close by there. And I'm not here to represent all of the people that live at 121st and Schweitzer or Olathe, and it's just they don't live anywhere near it. And I get it, they're driving out there and investing, putting money into the pockets of Stillwell Station or whatever it might be when they do that. But it isn't a fit, and I think the impact to the neighbors is just too great for what we want to do. To me, the lights are a hard no. It just is. I think we would be short sheeting our bed to be a dark sky community if we did this. And but again, and to me, and I'm not sure if these are the same people that had the Isinglass Equestrian Center. I actually looked at buying that facility. It had been abandoned for a long time, and I'm guessing they probably had to get some sort of a exception to build this huge white tent arena thing that was there. It was ginormous. You can see it from the road. And it had been abandoned. I know there was a horrible fire there and just a tragedy all around. But it made me think of, so that sat empty. When we went to look at it, all the copper had been stripped out, all the solar panels had been taken. It was an eyesore. What was it going to turn into? There was buildings unfinished. I mean, just like no sheetrock, just framing, no plumbing, it was just left. And there were needles on the ground. A buddy of mine that's a Johnson County Sheriff said that it was common for kids to go out there and use it as an abandoned facility. And to me, that's the bigger concern, is this isn't a fit for, it's such a unique use that if it isn't a moneymaker, then who's going to take it over if they don't want to keep going with it? And, I don't know how we'd resolve that, whether it be a irrevocable letter of credit or a bond or something like that to make sure it gets maintained if they chose, if that happened. But to me, there's just, I obviously I'm not for it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment on the last comment. I did look at the dark sky program. Now that's not a rule, but just for the benefit of the BOCC and everybody else, they clearly, the dark sky, official dark sky, they do certify outdoor sports lighting programs. So their comments are, thanks to advances in LED lighting technology, lighting designers have the tools to create projects which effectively manage glare and light trespass. The dark sky approved outdoor sports lighting program sets the standard for responsible outdoor sports lighting. Dark sky approved outdoor sports lighting fields exhibit what is possible through strict guidelines, advanced products, and quality lighting design. And in looking through a lot of this stuff, and I'm just giving my personal observation here. I don't know, I'm not sure about their 45-foot lights, because none of the ones I've seen, nobody seems to have that, but maybe they're out there and I'm not seeing them. But certainly, it's not like the dark sky people forbid, any outdoor sports lighting. And who knows how close this one is to that, but I do think it is possible. I guess part of my concern here is we have kind of a choice here. From what I saw at the BOCC, it's certainly, you would have to be unhearing and unseeing to not figure out that at least the great majority of the BOCC wants a soccer stadium out here. you know, and maybe they'll change their mind. I know they'll look at all of this and listen to it, but it seems to me that, we kind of have a choice of either sort of stonewalling it and saying we don't want it here, or for those that don't, or, putting a motion before the BOCC to pass this back up to them. But in that motion saying, all right, but if you're going to do this, we want to close at 8 p.m. That's late enough. We want additional screening. What they've got on 50-foot centers is not even close to 75% density. We need something like or equivalent to green giant arborvitae that would eventually get to 40 to 60 feet on 15-foot centers. To achieve that, we want a 5-year CUP. That's, if a motion were made to that effect, plus all the other stipulations that are in the application that they've stipulated to, I would support that, because I think that may be the only way we could get the residents in this area additional protection from the impacts of this.
This is Fred Winger. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the discussion tonight. You know, the traffic study, the lighting, the hours of operation are all dependent upon the operator. We've met November 16th. The operator wasn't here. Mr. Peterson, his law firm, is not the operator. The operator refused to talk tonight. We heard tonight that the lighting plan was based on the operator, Mr. Boer's cell phone. What's the operator's history? The traffic study is based on the information that the operator, which Mr. Boer, Mrs. Boer, and this entity, Cogent Enterprises LLC, provided. What's their history with soccer complexes? Did they run one anywhere? The answer is no. Mr. Peterson would have went on and on about their great job of running soccer complexes. What's their history with lighting? If it was my project, I would be up taking the stand bragging about my ability to run soccer complexes. I'd be bragging about my ability that everybody in my neighborhood, everywhere we operated these soccer complexes, we did a really great job. That's not the truth here. Matter of fact, we have evidence that maybe some of the businesses they ran weren't too well received in Stillwell. The applicant didn't want to come up and address that. We have information about some of the business they've been involved in lawsuits when they sold businesses. You know, so there's a reason I'm sure the operator didn't come up, but the operator is about traffic study. It's about the operator. Lighting's about the operator, the hours of operation about the operator. I'm not convinced that any of these have been addressed satisfactory. I support, you know, we make the motion, we forward the same recommendation of denial. And is there any more discussion?
I just want to make sure that county commissioners, that when we look at the Stillwell Community Plan, that plan was created by this board. In fact, I think Ken was even on the board when we assembled that. And the reason this is, and I joined the board after that, those wheels had already been moving, but the purpose of that plan was we didn't want to be like Stanley. We wanted to make sure that we kept that small town character, that we kept the character of the community, that we really embraced what we had. We spent years putting together, having public meetings. So in my opinion, that Stillwell Community Plan is Stillwell Community's opinion. And it's not old enough to say, well, that was the opinion of people that used to live here. It's not that old. So when we start looking at and then we took that plan and put lighting standards in place. And so to be able to vote against what the community opinion is and vote against standards that this board put in place and we got adopted through the county commissioners to say, hey, look, this is what the community and the people of Stillwell want. I have trouble with the lighting on the property. I think I could be swayed to say, hey, the project looks great. Do your outdoor fields, dusk the dawn. You know, it's like a Heritage, you know, where there's no lighting at Heritage and there's plenty of games and activities going on. But the lighting, I think, puts it over the top. I think it creates it that's not in harmony with not just the area, but Stillwell, period. And so I just can't consciously move forward with a lighting plan that exists in Stillwell that is very clear Stillwell has most recently collaborated and lobbied together and said, this is not what we want for community. That's just a struggle that I have.
Kelly Ross, I could be on board with that situation with still the 2 to 8 PM hours and then the no lighting. And then I'd still would almost want to start with maybe 2 or 3 fields outside just to make sure it goes well. But I'm also, if we do the 5-year CUP, then that sort of offsets that too. So I could go either way with that.
It's kind of hard to do a 5-year CUP when they're building a
Mm.
huge building.
True.
I mean, a building that seems like it's bigger than it needs to be. Unfortunately, that's not one of the things got remanded back to us to discuss, but I do agree the building is quite excessive.
I guess that could be something that if the applicant wanted to discuss or negotiate or change or something like that, could be a possibility before going up to the BOCC. I'm sure that Kelly Rass, sorry, be a phone call to the planners or whatever, but I'm in agreement with those two. The lots more landscaping and buffer, no lighting, hours 2 to 8. And then, I'm up for discussion with both the CUP and the amount of fields.
Mr. Chairman, with the permission of the chair and my colleagues here, I'm going to put a motion on the table, see if it gets a second, because I don't disagree with Commissioner Hollingsworth or Commissioner Rast at all about the local Stillwell plan and the importance of it. I guess I'm motivated more by the fact that I think if we simply send up a denial, the applicant is not going to be in a position to have to afford any additional protection to the residents that are around there. I think this, if you're going to put a soccer field there, I think this is configured pretty reasonably. I think the lighting is probably the top that you can get right now. I think they can do all of the things. I've read on this stuff to satisfy myself that I could even say this, knowing what the concerns are here. But I'm going to make a motion that this board recommend approval of the application, subject to all the current stipulations, on the condition that it be approved with hours of operation that cease all outside operation of the fields at 8 PM. That the lights are off at 8 PM outside. Secondly, that more screening would be installed at the north property boundary with either arborvitae green giant plantings or equivalent, intended to reach 40, 60-foot height and time, planted on nothing more than 15-foot centers to achieve the 75% density, both in the winter and in the summertime. And that the conditional use permit, even though it wasn't remanded to us, I would include in my motion a 5-year CUP. In support of the motion, I would simply say that we have a real problem here because it's, can we simply say no and not consider these conditional use permits? Well, we can, but we're not the final say on this. And I think what happens is you get the Board of County Commissioners who represent a much broader swath of the community, and all zoning is local. So we here are much more sensitive to the folks that have to live around this. One big complaint I have, and I have always seen in all of the zoning I've done in all the years I've done it as an attorney, is that the people that live around these developments are generally given short shrift by the planning boards and the city councils and the Board of County Commissioners if the thing that's going in as broader community support. And people sometimes, including my own clients, often forget the wisdom of realizing that you can't win all these battles. And sometimes you leave a lot of blood on the ground by not trying to negotiate or force for additional mitigation of your facility that would serve to lessen the impact. I think that's the reason that I would do this, because I fear that if this goes up, just going to be approved. And I think that's very unfortunate because that's essentially if the BOCC would approve this without additional mitigation, as I have suggested, then I think they're sending a message to the unincorporated area of the county that the local plans really don't matter if somebody comes along with a better deal. That's not a very good message to send out here, particularly when we have a Stillwell community plan. So I guess my motion is sounded on what I consider to be a reasonable effort to mitigate the impacts rather than simply saying no.
Kelly Ross, I know we have a motion, but can I bring what, since we're talking 8 PM for ceasing the lights, and I don't know if this is 100% true or not, but I've been hearing through the grapevine that there is the chance that daylight saving times is going to be going out the window at some point. It's going to be voted on again next year. Well, then we don't really need lights for the majority of the time that they're asking. So that could just take care of itself altogether. I mean, it's only going to be a few hours or, I mean, few weeks maybe, but especially if daylight saving times go away, then you're going to have light up till 8 o'clock for the most part. Anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there as maybe that's a win for everybody. And it can still be done that way, but I like everything you said, except for I'm kind of on the no lights myself.
Well, that's my motion anyway.
Is there a second?
I would second the motion.
Okay, Ken Sanders seconds the motion. Can we do a roll call vote?
Ken Klingensmith,
No.
Dan Foyle,
No.
Kelly Rast,
No,
Fred Wingert,
No.
Rod Richardson,
Yes.
and Ken Sanderson.
Yes.
That's 4 against, 2 in favor. Motion fails.
I would like to propose a second motion. The same motion that Rod just proposed, except that the outside fields ends at 8 PM or dusk. With everything else he said, exactly. And I'm actually okay with the 10-year use CUP with the investment that's occurring, but I'll stay with the 5-year CUP. So same motion as Rod minus the lights. Fields close at 8 PM or dusk.
Kelly Rast, I'll second the second motion.
So can you clarify again, what are we voting on?
So the motion is outside fields close at 8 PM or dusk, no lights. More screening with all the narrative that Rod eloquently spelled out, and a 5-year CUP.
So just for clarification, how does this meet the Stillwell community plan?
I look at from the lighting perspective. I'm looking at the other baseball fields that we have, that the Stillwell Community Park is designed to have all-purpose fields that are unlighted, that just haven't been developed yet. And so those are the elements that I looked at on it.
Kelly Rast, the biggest probably thing is the size of the building, but we're trying to find some win-win here.
And that wasn't remanded back for discussion, but I would like that to be addressed for it. But when I look at the harmony and you look at I kind of look at Stillwell, their baseball fields backs up to community, dusted on. There's no lights. There's no lights on any of the other baseball fields that we looked at. Academy doesn't have lights. So that stays consistent with it, recognizing that we are going to have development, and this isn't bad development. The fields are on the south side away from the residents. This additional screening would help with that. But I think it's the lighting is the biggest challenge that I personally have.
So you're proposing no lights?
No lights. So it's the fields, outdoor fields dusted, end at 8 PM or dusk. The additional screening as Rod outlined. And then I would be fine on a 5-year CUP. But that's the motion. From a discussion point, I think we could, as a community, take a look at a broader impact with the applicant and look at it from a broader community perspective, because this impacts not the neighborhood, this impacts Stillwell. And I think that it would be more responsible for the community to get together and relook at the standards, look at the new lighting, look at the technology that exists, maybe adjust that to where then in 5 years, let's come back and add lighting but it'll be a community-based initiative, knowing development's forthcoming. And we can look at dark sky, we can look at those other elements, but to prove it with lighting, knowing where we stand today with what's in place today, that's just where I struggle.
Question?
Um,
I understand your motion and I'm considering it, but let me ask you this. If we took, how would you feel if the applicant, if the condition for the applicant to have lighting up to but not past 8 PM required them to get dark sky certification?
Knowing the direction of the township and where we're headed, I think that is a reasonable I think that is reasonable because that is the initiative that we're looking for. We want to protect the dark sky.
Would you entertain an amendment to your motion to that effect? That they could have lights to 8 PM as long as the lighting is dark sky certified?
Actually,
I would second your motion.
well, Kelly had seconded, but are you okay with that?
Aren't we,
Kelly Rast, I
aren't we gonna,
agree.
We're so not doing this properly.
don't we discuss the amendment?
Yeah, we can discuss the amendment, absolutely.
Yeah, I would be against the amendment. I think the way you propose, the addition to the Rod's addition, I support no lights. There's no need to put lights out there. Like, if we're going for the dark sky initiative, there's no reason to do that.
Well,
No.
Kelly Rast, they would have to go through the certification and they could also choose not to do the lights if it's gonna shut down at 8 anyway, because that's pretty close to, the sun going down and let's pray for daylight saving
Yeah.
get kicked, but
I think we really need to bring the community into that. Back to Fred's point, it needs to be a community. The community said they don't want lights. We need, the Board of Commissioners and our board should respect that. And then bring it back and then look at, would the community support dark sky certification? Would the community support a change in the standards? What's the community support? Because they're the ones that created the plan. So that would make more sense to let the community voice that and keep that as an open item that we then bring back.
The only concern I have about that is the longstanding zoning injunction about zoning is not a plebiscite of the neighbors, period, for the community. They can create and help have input into the master plan, et cetera, but it ultimately, it's broader than the local community. I mean, and that's ultimately what the BOCC has to look at. I don't think you can say we want to be a dark sky community, but then say, well, but no lights. I mean, I personally, in the world that I'd like to live in, there wouldn't be any night lighting. But I think practically speaking, if you gave the applicant, and the applicant may say, blow it out your ear as far as dark sky, but I mean, if they had this dark sky certified, then the dark sky organization that's at the heart of what Stillwell wants to do is saying, we're okay with this. I don't know how you can then stand up and say, well, it's okay that you're okay with it, but we want more. I don't think you can do that. And I don't think it looks good. I think if, and I don't know who seconded the amended motion, but I intended to, I'd like to at least see if, where we are on that, because it would give the applicant something to work with.
So let me go ahead and reiterate with the amended motion. So the motion on the table is going to be that we want to have outside fields that are done at 8 PM, that there'll be no lights unless the lighting plan is approved by the Dark Sky International Communities Sports Outdoor Certification. More screening, as Rod initially put in his initial proposal, and then a 5-year CUP. And so that's the motion we have on the table. Is there a second?
Kelly Rast, second.
Okay, can we go and do a roll call on that?
Yes, Chair. Ken Klingensmith?
I agree. Yes.
Oh, Ken.
That's Sanderson, but that's okay.
Yes, you can.
We're 2 Kens now.
Okay.
Ken Klingensmith, I'll support that.
Dan Foyle?
Yes.
Kelly Rast,
Yes.
Fred Wingert,
Yes.
and Rod Richardson.
Yes.
That's 6 in favor, motion passes.
Okay, this will go to county commissioners.
That was a motion and action for the CUP. You also need to take action on
sorry,
the
sorry, thank you.
preliminary plat.
That was, I gotta do the second one.
Yeah.
So that was the motion for the preliminary plat. Thank you.
No, that was
That was the motion for the conditional use.
for
permit.
the CUP.
I do the plat.
Got it. And the preliminary plat. We have a motion for the preliminary plat.
Is
That
this
was
it?
the
Oh,
first one.
Kelly Rast, I move to approve a preliminary plat for 5 industrial lots to be known as Metcalf Soccer Complex and 2 plat exceptions regarding driveways for the reasons and subject to the stipulations recommended by staff and listed in the staff report.
And does that plat include lighting? No? Okay.
The definition of the
Land.
land, the lots, the
Okay.
easements, all that.
Okay, well, we approved the conditional use permit, so we probably should have done the preliminary
Yeah.
plat first, but I'll go ahead and second that motion.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Ken Klingensmith,
Yes.
Dan Foyle,
Yes.
Kelly Rast,
Yes.
Fred Wingert, Rod Richardson, and Ken Sanderson.
Yes.
That's 6 in favor, motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, Sean Penley, planning staff, I would want to ask for one clarification just to be sure on the original motion for the CUP for the motion to approve with ending at 8 PM with lightings with dark sky certification. Is that intended to remain at all times, even with dark sky? As the applicant wants it till 10 PM, you're asking for 8 PM year round regardless of whether it's light. So in the summer it could potentially go till 9 PM. It's light enough. You're still intending this to be ending at 8 PM year round regardless of whether there's lights?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, other business, sorry, I was rethinking through that. Any other business before the board? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.